Have you ever noticed that sometimes the biggest block to your manifestations isn't a lack of desire? It's just simply inaction. You want the thing, you think about the thing, you even visualize the thing, and yet something inside you hesitates. Today's episode is a powerful conversation about resistance and the inner patterns that can slow down our growth without us even realizing it. My guest, Kam Knight, is a best-selling author and an expert in illuminating what internal resistance is and how to navigate it. So if you've ever wondered why you're not taking action on the life that you say you want, this conversation is going to feel eye-opening, grounding, and supportive. Welcome to the Manifestation and Money Podcast, the show where we tackle the taboo topics of money and manifestation. I'm your host, Jenny Schultz, former 9-to-5 grinder who ditched the status quo and went all in on creating a life I love. Yes, I use manifestation. Yes, I took action. And yes, I created a 7-figure net worth before turning 40. Every week, I'll bring you inspiring stories with money mavens and manifestation masters. From learning how to make more, save more, and grow your wealth to unlocking the power of manifesting your dream life. I am so excited to play in this space with you. Let's jump into creating a life you love. Welcome to the Manifestation and Money Podcast, Kam.
Thank you very much, Jen. I'm really happy to be here.
I am so pumped to chat with you today because you are a guy who has a kind of a sweet spot. In manifestation, people get hung up because often we want to do something, but we feel that internal resistance to do the thing we want to do. And that is your
Yeah,
sweet spot. That's what you like talking about. So
yeah.
I would love for you to share with the listeners, first off, who you are and what your story is.
All right, great. So my name is Kam Knight. I'm a coach, international speaker, and best-selling author of a dozen books in the area of mental, physical, and emotional performance that have sold over 500,000 copies and have over 10,000 ratings on Amazon. And now I talk about a concept called internal resistance, which answers a question I had my whole life, and that is, why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation and desire to do it, but for one reason or another, I can't or don't do it. And my story really is, for most of my life, I've been a fairly driven individual. And what I like to say is, growing up in this time and in this culture, it's hard not to be so driven with everyone telling you to do more and be your best self and reach for the stars. As a result, I've always wanted to do more, have more, and be more in life. And although I've had my fair share of success, I always felt like the success was much more difficult than it needed to be, or that I fell short or missed the mark. And I always wondered why that was. And the more books I read and coaching I did and seminars I attended, the more I learned about the complexities of the human brain. And over time, my mind was just taking in all that information. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I had this epiphany or aha moment where I was like, oh, wow, there's a part of our mind designed to hold us back. There's a part of our brain built to keep us from going and making progress. And I call this part resistance. And it's this brick wall that we hit anytime that we want to do something, and we can't, no matter how much we want to do it. Now, as it relates to manifestation, what I want to bring to that topic of manifestation is that a lot of times people are manifesting consciously. They want to kind of manifest, but we forget that our unconscious is also manifesting. And if we have resistance or we have blocks going on, then it's going to be manifesting that. And if we're not aware of that, we might kind of feel, well, why aren't my manifestation efforts working? And it's easy to assume it's because we weren't meant for the success, when the reality is there's something going on internally that's causing resistance, and it's also manifesting as well. And it could be the exact opposite of what the person is seeking.
Yeah, that's a valid point there. And so often we feel it in our body. We know we want to do the thing and we're not doing it.
Yeah.
And quite often you're right, it is the subconscious block. So how does somebody work with that? So they might be going, okay, yeah, so it's a subconscious block. Now what?
Yeah. Yeah. And so that doesn't really, by just saying, oh, it's a subconscious block, that doesn't really help us out. So what I like to help people understand is how resistance works in the first place. So the part of the brain that creates wants and desires, it actually works separate from the part that actually allows us to act on the desire. This is really key. I'll say it one more time. The part of the brain that creates wants works independent of the part that actually allows us to act on the want. So we have one part of the brain that's creating wants, and in many ways is unrestrained. It's creating wants one after another at a pace faster than anyone can achieve. Now, this part was never meant to see if a want was worth going after or pursuing. Its only job is to create wants. And in many ways, it can kind of go overboard, creating all sorts of wants. And then we have another part of the brain that checks to see if that want is achievable, fulfilling, or worth going after. And if this part doesn't give the green light, we cannot act. So what's really important here is it's possible for one brain to both create a desire for something and at the same time keep us from going after it. And this is where that feeling that you said, where a person can feel that, tension in their body comes from. It's like they want that thing, but then a part of them is saying no or holding them back from it. It really helps to understand this dynamic first. And to take it one step further, anytime a desire, a decision, or a course of action stands before us, it gets evaluated by this part of the brain or resistance using a whole host of criteria. And if the decision is not in line with any of the criteria, it will prevent action. So a great analogy for this is standing before a panel of judges or board of directors. Every decision that comes up must go through them. And if even one of the members is against the idea, it won't pass. It really helps to work through what in our unconscious or what criteria is holding us back. And then to work on removing that criteria. And I'll just give some examples of what some of these criteria could be. One can be a self-image criteria, meaning if a person has an identity or self-image of being poor or having kind of limitations, then it doesn't matter how much wants a person has, that part of the resistance is going to hold them back. So then it helps to work on the self-image and improve their self-image or their limiting identity of themselves. But this stuff can go actually quite deep. It could go into even things like what the people from our childhood are thinking of us. Meaning, I have worked with a lot of people with resistance, and one thing that comes up over and over is oftentimes they have resistance because a part of their brain is worried about what the kids that they grew up with are still thinking of them. And even though we're all grown up, don't live near them or see them, or even though we may live in a completely different city, state, or country, a part of our brain is still concerned about what they're thinking, and it's affecting our decisions right here and now. So we might want to do something, and resistance filters through what will these kids think if I do this, or have success, or if I fail here.
That's
It's
interesting. So you're saying that, so especially now I think of like Facebook and where you have connectivity to these people, these peers that you grew up with that you kind of reconnect
yeah,
with over time on this social platform. So there's a part of me that could still be resistance because I'm worried if I post something about my life that I'm doing that I will be judged by my peers from my grade 1 class.
exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
Even though you don't talk to them, even though they might not even be connected to you on social media, it still plays out. And it's much more common than you think. Like I said, the more people I help through resistance, the more this actually comes up. And in fact, I will go as far as to say, I know for a fact, everyone listening here has people from their childhood, memories from people from their childhood flash in their mind from time to time. And those memories actually don't show up for nostalgic reasons. They actually show up to reinforce the walls in our life. There was likely a want or desire, and then a memory of such a person flashes, and the brain goes, nope, I don't want to do that. And oftentimes we don't even know there was a desire underneath, but likely there was. And so that's just one cause of resistance. There's a lot of others. So I'm just trying to give a framework of how this is working. And so if that's the case, then the person needs to work through that in order to be able to manifest what they're seeking, because they might, like I said, their wanting mechanism might want this one thing and they want to manifest it, but resistance is going, well, what would this person think? Or maybe this person will laugh at us if we get it. It puts the brakes on them in manifesting that.
So if somebody's noticing that they're having, say, like you said before, this image of I'm poor or whatever it is, where they're being judged for something. So you're saying then that kind of you have to go in to figure out, I need to work on worrying about what other people think about me before I can, that's what's blocking me from manifesting tens of thousands of dollars in my bank account.
Yeah.
Because I'm worried about the business idea I have might not work out because I'll be judged on it. Kind of like that kind of puzzle piece.
In a way, yeah. So they might have an idea for business, and the brain might go, well, if you fail and these people find out, it'll suck. So let's not try it so we don't fail, and then these people will never find out. And if that's the worry, then we kind of have to work through the judgment of what people are going to think if we fail or if we succeed, because it could also be success. Meaning, if people find out I'm doing this might be embarrassing, and we don't want to create embarrassment, so let's not do this thing. I'll give an example of it. So now I do social dancing, I do salsa and bachata, and I really enjoy it. And I thought to myself, why didn't I start this sooner? Because if I had started sooner, I'd be much further along by now. And for me, the resistance was obvious because growing up, dancing was kind of stigmatized for males. And although no one ever explicitly said this wasn't something to do, of the thousands of interactions I had on the playground, hundreds of interactions off the playground, and just growing up in society, my conditioning was you got to do the male things like hobbies like cars and sports like baseball and stuff. And so unconsciously, I had no idea that a part of me was resisting doing something like that because of the conditioning I had. My brain was worried if people find out that I do salsa and bachata, what will they think? But I didn't even realize that was actually running in me until I dove into that resistance. It can be quite deep how the influence of people can play into our resistance. And that's just the people aspect of it. There's other causes of resistance. And so once I kind of narrowed in on it, I was like, oh, wow, yeah, there was this hesitation because of that. And I got to a point in my life where that didn't matter anymore. I was able to do dance, but when I was younger and it did matter, I wasn't able to. So I hope that makes more sense.
That does. And do you think then that this resistance that our brain is doing, we're subconsciously doing it to keep ourselves to feel safe?
So a lot of times when I talk about resistance, that's where people's mind go to. Is it a safety mechanism? In some cases it is, but in other cases, there's other stuff playing out. For example, authority issues. Authority issues relate to our unconsciously held attitudes toward authority figures such as parents, principals, priests, police officers. And I'll even extend the definition to personal development coaches like ourselves. And I'll share a really quick story. So I knew someone whose parents always nagged him about cleaning his room. They nagged and pestered him so much that eventually he became spiteful towards them. And as a result, he lived a messy life simply out of spite. He didn't know why until he saw a therapist that his messy lifestyle was triggered by his parents from 20 years ago. He didn't know why he couldn't stay clean and organized no matter how hard he tried. In this case, it wasn't about a protection mechanism. It was more about when he was growing up, he had people always telling him what to do and what not to do and how to do it and how not to do it. So his brain got fed up and didn't want to listen to or take advice from anyone. Even though he grew up and wanted to do those things and it would be helpful to do it, he couldn't because the authority response would kick in that would prevent him from doing it. So in this case, it's not so much about a survival thing. It was that his brain got really upset at the authorities in his life and didn't want to do anything to spite them. And what's really crazy about authority issues is that oftentimes our authority issues hurt no one else but ourselves. So when we don't listen to our parents, it doesn't affect them, it really affects us. When we don't listen to our teachers, it doesn't affect their grades, it affects our grades. Again, in this case, it's not so much a survival or defense mechanism thing, it's more like an upset thing. And This authority response is trying to, in a way, outsmart and hurt the other person. But then it can go in a different direction. Have you ever, like in school, like did well on an exam without studying and you got this high, like, wow, I did well without having to put in effort, study, and things like that? Did you ever
Hmm.
have that?
Yeah.
So we've all had moments like that. And that pattern can get locked in us where we feel like, oh, we don't have to work as hard as the next guy and get the same result. And because that high feels so good for not doing as work as the next guy and getting good results, the brain wants to continue that pattern. So it makes us put in as little effort as possible to get maximum results so we can continue getting that high, right? So in this case,
Oh,
resistance comes up because it wants this high. And so it limits our amount of effort we put into things so we can continue getting that high. And so in this case, when we have challenges doing what we want, it could be because of that.
the fact that they're so rooted back to when we're little. Like, as you were talking about the two sides of our brain, I was immediately thinking of my kids as being the one side of my brain that's doing all the asking. Because we just had Valentine's Day. Can I have candy for breakfast today? Because they have
Yeah.
all this excess candy. And I
Yeah.
am the person who's the other half of that brain that's like, you can't have candy for breakfast because that's not a healthy start. Coming up with all
Yeah.
the resistance reasons why they
Yeah.
shouldn't. And then even now hearing about it's almost like an inner child inside of us who's having this little temper tantrum that's like, I'm going to go against authority and not do this thing, and not realizing that we're carrying it through the rest of our life.
Yeah. So a couple things I want to say about this. One is you can think of the wanting mechanism, the part that creates wants, like a kid in a candy store. It's like
Yeah.
kid that just wants everything. And resistance is like the parent trying to keep it in check.
Mhm.
So this is really the reason resistance comes up in a lot of ways. And in a lot of ways, most adults are still run by a little child inside.
Mhm.
And I don't mean some, I mean most of us are. In fact, unless you're doing a lot of inner work, it's hard to even realize that you're being run by a child, so you can't really stop it. And even when you do a lot of inner work, because I've been in the periphery of a lot of personal development and around people who are doing that work, and you'd be surprised how much they still are acting like a child. And so, yeah, definitely. In fact, what I have learned in my experience, if I could narrow it down to like what the root of most people's challenges and resistance, what I would say is that it's because people don't want to grow up. They
Mhm.
want the results of being an adult without growing up. And what's worse is that this has kind of been ingrained into our media. You know, you have music and songs like Forever Young, jingles like I don't want to grow up, movies that are reinforcing this concept like Peter Pan. And it's kind of created this on a societal level that growing up is bad, and being an adult is somehow boring, and that we should stay as a kid. Yet we still want the outcome of the adult while still being a child. And because a part of our brain is holding on to this idea that being an adult is bad or wrong, or that it's better to be a child, when we do want to do certain things and not getting results, is because this thing kicks in. It's like, oh yeah, but if we do that, we're going to be more like an adult, and then it goes against our, I guess, self-image or identity of staying young forever and things of that nature. If I were to narrow resistance all the way down to like the core cause, I would say is that people just don't want to grow up.
That's fascinating. So,
Yeah.
how do we keep that piece of ourself that wants to do the asking? Because we still want to dream big, we still want to go do all those things. How do we get that with the part of our body that is responsible and reasoning? And yes, it may be still carrying a lot of baggage from our childhood. How do we get them on the same page to allow us to dream and go after what we want?
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say is that as I've been putting more effort into adulting and help my clients also become adults or see the value in it so they can have what they want, it's important to understand that it's not a bad or boring feeling. Like it feels good when you take responsibility and you show up on a consistent basis and you work towards a goal or a bigger, you know, aspiration. Like it makes it seem like we're going to be going through some boring things and we don't get to still have fun. But there is a level of joy in that that is not possible any other way. And I use the word joy very specifically, like there is joy there. So it's not something we need to resist. The second thing to understand is we have an overactive wanting mechanism, meaning it doesn't necessarily check to see if a want that it's creating, it's going to be achievable, if it's going to be fulfilling, or if it conflicts with other wants we have. It simply creates a want. It's more or less a want on, off on switch where it sees something like an iPhone and it wants it. It sees somebody attractive and wants that too. If we can understand that's how our wanting mechanism works, then we have to be more conscious of the wants that it's triggering. And we have to be aware like, hey, my wanting mechanism is triggering this want. Do I actually have the time and bandwidth for it? Because I'm working on these other things. And if I do, is this actually going to be fulfilling? Because our wants can seem like it's going to be very fulfilling. But how many times have we got something that we wanted and it didn't make us feel like we thought it would? And so we have to look at our past to see, hey, my wants in the past made it seem like if I got this thing or went after this thing, that my life would be great. And did it really turn out great? So in a way, we have to become the parent of our wanting mechanism so we can pick and choose the right want. And one of the ways to do that is to know that we're living in a time where there are so many more things to do, so many more options, and so many more experiences to have had that our wanting mechanism is being triggered and stimulated even more than ever before. And so we're living in a time where we have to say more no's than yes. I would say for every one yes, we have to say like 9 no's to our not wanting mechanism to be able to actually achieve the thing we want and possibly gain the fulfillment. And then, of course, we want to work on the resistance itself because even though we can narrow in on a specific want, it doesn't mean that resistance will allow us to go after it. And I give a couple of reasons for why resistance can come in. And if we have this high going on where we're trying to get maximum results by minimum effort, we need to work through that. If we have concerns about what people are going to think of us, whether it's people from our childhood or even our current life, it'll help to work through that. If it's another cause of resistance, like authority issues, where I know I want this thing, but a part of me doesn't want to go after it because we really want to piss off the people in our lives who told us we should be doing those things. If a person had that going on, then it helps to work through that.
I love how you added fulfillment in because if we can
Yeah.
use that as a filter, I think that is so important. And when you were saying how our brains over ask, an immediate example popped into my head for me was I would love to sit somewhere, like live somewhere by a tropical beach where I could go look at tidal pools every day, sit in the sun, palm trees. Yet,
Yeah.
I also want to be close to family, which
Yeah.
puts me here in Canada in the middle of winter where it's snowing right now. Like those are two very different living situations I want.
Yeah.
I am therefore not living at the beach where part of me wants to live. I could
Yeah.
vacation there, but I am
Yeah.
living close to family where I feel fulfilled. I can see them every
Yeah.
day, and that is the piece that feels the best for me. So I love thinking of fulfillment as kind of a compass to guide your
Yeah.
wants.
Exactly. And this is a really great example of what I call a conflicting want. So before I talk about conflicting wants, I do want to say that when it comes to wants and resistance, both parts of the brain can get in our way. It seems like only resistance will get in our way, but our own wants can be a hindrance to achieving our wants. And I gave one reason as to why, because when we have overactive wants and our brain is pulling us in every direction, it's difficult to move in any one. But that's only one challenge of it. In my work, I've uncovered a good dozen, and one of them has to do with conflicting wants. As I mentioned, the part of the brain that does create wants doesn't check to see if a want it's creating conflict with another want. So it can create two wants where having one means giving up another.
Mhm.
In fact, the fundamental nature of the universe means you have to give up the other. And this is a perfect example. You want to live in two different places, but you being one being, you can't live in both places. And what's crazy about conflicting wants is that the brain doesn't understand that you have to pick one or the other. And oftentimes it'll cause us to chase both. And almost always, anybody who chases both ends up achieving neither.
Ah.
So it's really important to pick one and let go of the other. In fact, it's almost impossible not to go after one without giving up the other. But what makes this even more challenging is as soon as you pick one, your brain begins nagging you about the other. What if you had the other and wants to pull you to the other? And as soon as you switch to the other, it'll start nagging you about the first, wondering what if you stayed with the first, and even creating pain that you don't have the first and pulling you back. And so this really speaks to that quote, you can't have your cake and eat it too. It's really important to understand how our wants come. And then we talked about fulfillment, and I want to talk a little bit about that. And there's a word called alignment these days. Like people are saying you have to be aligned with your goals and aspirations. Though, what does alignment really mean? Does it have to do with the wheels of a car? Well, at the most basic fundamental level, alignment, in my opinion, simply means what the mind creates, the want the mind creates, and how the body responds. Just because the brain creates a want for something doesn't mean our body will respond to it, always respond to it, or as much as we think. In fact, it could respond to something completely different. And this is another challenge of wants because our brain can create our desire for something and convince us it'll be fulfilling. But when we go after it or when we achieve it, it's not fulfilling at all. In fact, it could be the quite opposite. It really helps to be careful of the wants we're chasing and be more honed in on things that are going to be fulfilling. And again, it helps to look through our past and see, hey, which wants did my brain create that said we're going to be fulfilling, but really were and we're not, and really move towards the ones from past experience that gave indication that it was fulfilling. And unfortunately, sometimes you won't know if something is fulfilling unless you actually try it. So
That's so true. I feel like we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg here
it's
today.
just the tip of the iceberg. Yeah.
Just the tip of the iceberg. But I'd love for you to share with the listeners where they can reach out, find you, and carry on this conversation.
Yeah. So I've got 3 free gifts for everyone here. The first is called Prompt Engineering for Your Mind. The human brain was the original ChatGPT, and you can prompt it to give you answers and solutions just like ChatGPT. But unlike ChatGPT, you can also prompt it to help you take action on those answers and solutions. And a person can learn to do that in the first guide. The second guide is called Build Skills and Habits in Your Sleep. In order to kind of move in the direction we want, we actually have to change the unconscious. Because if the unconscious wants to go in one direction and we want to go another direction, of course, we're going to get that resistance. But if we can rewire or program our unconscious to move in the direction we want, it makes it easier. And people can learn how to do that in the second guide. And the third guide is a deeper dive into this topic of internal resistance, which goes into other challenges our wanting mechanism creates, other causes of resistance that we didn't get a chance to talk about here. But more importantly, it introduces a concept of the tricks of resistance, which is going to be really important to know as well. And so they can get all 3 guides on my website at kamknight.com. And if anybody wants to do one-on-one work with me, I developed a technique that goes beyond NLP and hypnosis. And I can take people into their unconscious to work on their resistance directly. It's a much more direct and quicker way to move through their blocks. And they can reach out to me at coach@kamknight.com to learn more about that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. And before I let you go, I would love for you to share with the listeners your biggest piece of advice for them to go out and create a life they love.
Yeah. So when it comes to resistance, I want people to understand that wanting does not lead to having. Just because we want something doesn't mean we'll take the necessary steps to go after it. And that's because we have this part of the brain called resistance that's designed to hold us back. And if we could just assume that because we want something, we'll be able to go after it, when we do hit up on hurdles and roadblocks, it will derail us. But if we can be aware that, hey, hurdles and roadblocks will come up, and more than likely it's going to be coming up from my own self, it'll make it much easier to stay on course. So that would be the last piece of advice I'd leave for everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for joining me for this conversation today, Kam.
Yeah, this is fantastic. I really enjoyed it.
Me too. Thanks for listening. If today ignited a spark within you, come play with us inside Manifestation Playground on School. You can join for free and dive into the Manifestation Vault right away. Come say hi to me and the other amazing members in the welcome thread, or just lurk and soak it all in. Both are totally welcome. Grab your spot at manifestationplayground.ca. I'll see you inside. Cheers to creating a life you love.